Hey everyone, I'm Go-Getter Michelle, and this is the Go-Getter Gal Show. Today, I'm asking the tough question, but I'm also going to help you answer it. And that is, what is your purpose in life or your why? So what is the unique reason that I was placed on this earth at this time, and how can I best use my talents and abilities during my lifetime? That's a pretty big question, and honestly, it can be like a little bit daunting thinking about why you're here on earth and what your purpose in life is. But even though it's a difficult thing to work through and it's pretty deep, a go-getter practices that delayed gratification to go through sometimes difficult and slow processes for a greater reward in the future. But before we move on to discovering your why, I need to add a little bit of a disclaimer. If you feel like your life is a little bit out of control, your physical or psychological needs are not necessarily met, we're going to have to back up and solve those problems first before moving on to finding your why or purpose in life. To take somewhat of an audit of where you are and if you're ready to start thinking about what your why is, let's take a look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, this little pyramid talks about human needs in a sequential order. So the needs at the bottom of the pyramid must be met before going up to the top. The very bottom of the pyramid is just our basic needs. So food, shelter, basically surviving. The next level is safety. So having some security and stability in your life. Following that would be relationships. So having deep, loving relationships with family and friends in your life. That also kind of ties into security. The next level is esteem, which means having respect for yourself and also for others. And the very top of the pyramid is self-actualization, or realizing your full potential, which is what the Go-Getter Gal channel is all about. But if you haven't moved up the pyramid and you don't have loving relationships or good self-esteem, it's going to be pretty difficult to discover your why or your purpose in life. So one thing I recommend, especially if you're having trouble on the esteem level, is to watch my video about changing your mindset so you can rework your mind about what you might think about yourself or what you may think about being a go-getter so you can up level to discover your why. So the concept of having a why was popularized by Simon Sinek. He had a really popular TED Talk on this topic of why. He's also written 2 books about it, and even though he mostly talks about why in the context of businesses, all the principles can be applied to your personal life and finding your purpose in your life, not just a purpose for a business. And I've also listened to a podcast, a Nike trained podcast that featured Simon Sinek, and I'll link that below. And he talked about the importance of why and kind of how to discover and find that. And it's only 30 minutes long. And one interesting thing about the podcast, a little preview, is that he recommends asking people who are closest to you in your life a lot of questions about yourself and seeing how they respond in order to help you find your purpose. That's not exactly the way I'd recommend it from the get-go. I think it takes a lot of self-reflection, but an interesting concept nonetheless, especially when you're trying to dive deeper into discovering your purpose. All right, so why, the importance of the why, it really can't be overstated. And there's 2 main reasons that I want to emphasize the importance of this topic. The first reason is when you have a defined why, you're going to have a more meaningful and fulfilling life. When you live your life with a purpose, your actions are more intentional towards achieving that purpose in your life. Instead of floundering around, you can be more strategic and have a purpose behind the actions that you do in your day-to-day life. The second reason is not only having intention behind your actions and behind your life, having a strong why also can provide motivation. So when the going gets tough, having a motivating factor and a reason behind why you're doing what you're doing can help you stay committed to it. So I think both of those are really important things. You want to have a life that's designed. You don't just want to let life happen to you. A go-getter takes initiative and wants to design a life and create a life that they want. And that takes figuring out a purpose and drive for why you're doing what you're doing. And that drive can be a motivating factor for when the going gets tough. And now on to the fun and difficult part, discovering your why. Now this will take a good amount of time and effort, but it's definitely worth it so you live a more intentional and meaningful life. So I'm going to have 2 sections with questions in each section that I'm going to go through in this video, and you can take some time to pause the video and journal about the questions now, or you can go back to a blog post. I'll have the questions listed on there also, and that'll be linked in the description below. So even if you're not a big journaler, maybe take some time alone and go on a walk or a drive in your car so you can really spend some time reflecting about these questions. The first section that I want to talk about is assessing your values. And so the question I want to pose is, what are the things in your life or the people in your life that are most important to you? And I think a lot of us have kind of a pre-made list in our head that we can just spout off at any time someone says, oh, what's most important to you? My family, the church, whatever those may be. But I really want you to dive deep and think about this question and be honest with yourself. And a way to think about what's most important to you is where you spend your time, your money, and your energy. So you can claim that something is super important to you and that you truly value a lot. But when you take a look at your actions, what are you actually spending most of your time on, spending most of your money, and spending most of your energy? I've heard it said before that if someone just lets me look at their bank account or their credit card statement, I'll know exactly what they value, and I completely agree with that. There are other factors that come into play, but I think it's really important that when taking a look at where you spend your time, energy, and money, you realize that it's out of alignment with your values, maybe it means it's time to make a change. Or maybe this is an opportunity for you to admit to yourself, hey, I value things that are different than what I've maybe been claiming are my values. And that's okay. You can just move forward with your planning knowing what's actually important to you. And then the second question that I want to pose to you all is, what do I want people to say at my funeral or who do I want to be there? Again, that's a really deep question that we don't like to think about on an everyday basis. I don't like to think about that on an everyday basis, but it's super important because that also will lead you to the bigger picture in life of what is important and kind of the vision you want for your life. So what's most important to you and what do you want people to say at your funeral? That is the first step, assessing your values. The second area that I want you to reflect on is your interests and your abilities. And I have a couple different questions to ask about that. And the first would be, what do I love to do? So this could be what you like to do in your free time, what you enjoy doing at your job or career, what you love to do with your family, what type of music you like. This doesn't have to be limited to one area of your life. It's a very broad scope, and I want you to just run wild with it. The second question is, what am I working on when I lose track of time or when I'm experiencing flow at work? So you could be working on something for hours and not even notice, or someone could be making a big distraction and you don't even realize you're just so focused and in the zone with your work, as some people like to call it. So I think that's a really important thing to reflect on, and it's a little bit more career specific, but it also could be anything you're doing for your hobbies that you're working on. Question number 3. What are my top 5 strengths? If you haven't taken the Strengths Finders test already, I highly recommend it. I'll link that in the description below. But you can reflect on your own even without taking the assessment on what are things that come naturally to me that I enjoy doing. It could kind of tie into what you're doing when you experience a state of flow at work. And it doesn't just have to be related to your job. You could also think about your strengths within your interpersonal relationships or your hobbies, lots of areas of your life. The next question is, what problems can I best solve using my talents and skills? So it's important to answer these questions in order, because if you know what your top strengths are, it will be easier to answer this question and identify some problems in the world, knowing this, you have the skills to solve some of those problems. And the last question is more career specific, and it is, what job exists that could solve these problems, or what jobs exist that could solve these problems. So this takes it a step further than just a hobby, and it's thinking about what ways you could possibly get paid to solve some of the problems you already identified in the previous questions that you have the skills to solve. So I'm going to go through the questions one more time. Number 1 is, what do I love? Number 2 is, when do I experience a state of flow, or what am I working on when I'm in the zone? Number 3, what are my top 5 strengths? Number 4, what problems are there that I can best solve with my skills and abilities? Number 5, what jobs exist to solve these problems? So I want you to take some time to reflect on those questions, and you can either sit down and journal, or like I said, just spend some time alone thinking about them. But all of these questions lead into this diagram. So it can be a little bit confusing looking at it from the get-go, but it has 4 different circles that overlap: what you love, what you're great at, what you can get paid for, and what the world needs. So that sweet spot in the middle is if you can find something that fits all of those criteria, where basically your interests, your talents, opportunity, and need align. I personally think it's a little bit rare to find a why in that sweet spot, and your why doesn't have to be in that sweet spot. I think having something that you love, that you're great and talented at, and that the world needs is a very worthwhile purpose. Not everything has to be related to the job that you do. And even beyond the diagram, you can have a purpose in life, or a why, that's more like a broad overarching theme rather than something as specific for a job. So an example of this in my life is, as a Christian, I know that my purpose in life is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And so this overall theme informs everything else that I do in my life. A more specific why would be figuring out the gifts that God has given me and how I can use those to serve the world doing something that I enjoy. And a bonus if I get paid for it. So I'm combining my values, those first set of questions that I asked you, with my interests and abilities, those second set of questions, for a theme leading into something more specific of how I can use my talents and skills. Taking the time to figure out your why is not something that typically happens overnight, but it's worth the time and effort so you can lead a more meaningful life. And something I want to mention is that having a why does not have to be limited to your purpose in life. You can have a why reason behind different tasks that you do and different goals that you set, because having that why factor will make it a lot more likely that you are motivated to achieve those goals or complete whatever those tasks are. I'll dive into this concept a little bit more when I do a video specifically about goals, but I wanted to mention it now while you're thinking about the big, broad concept of the purpose of your life. You can also break it down into maybe a more bite-sized piece for just defining a why for a specific goal that you may have. I'd love to hear how you guys have figured it out. Have you defined your purpose in life and your why? If so, leave a comment below and let me know how you did that and if you found something in the sweet spot. And as always, I'd love to continue the conversation over on Instagram at GoGetterMichelle. And don't forget to subscribe to the Go Getter Gal channel on YouTube. It really makes a huge difference and I appreciate your support. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.